today. Really excited to have our guest, Paige Reeve. I will introduce her in a bit. We also have our fantastic technical facilitator, Jim, on the call today. And actually, Olivia from last week is going to be joining us as well. She had so much fun last week. She wanted to come back and join with us again today. So at some point, she'll be popping by. Super, super excited to have you guys back. This is week 2, as I mentioned before. Last week, Olivia Huffman was on talking about how to kind of get into that flow state of your athletic performance. And we had a lot of great questions and answers at the end. As last week, if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the Q&A at the bottom. We will open up the chat for everybody towards the end of the presentation. And feel free to ask anything you guys want. Only you can see the questions in the Q&A, so don't be embarrassed when you drop them in the chat, though everybody can see them. So Coach Paige and I will do our best to answer all your questions in a timely manner. I know we ran a little bit short last week, so if you have a question that was bothering you last week, make sure you get it in early this week. Before I let Coach go on and present, I did have a few questions about the planner come into me from last week's session. The majority of you on this call have probably either purchased or are interested in purchasing the Win the Day planner for student athletes. One of the questions that I had this week was pertaining to the Win the Week compared to Win the Day. So what I want to do really quickly is I want to share my screen with you. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up my area here. And I want to share the difference between the Win the Week and the Win the Day. And I want you to think about it in terms of Win the Week is essentially your Sunday page. We have a saying at Win the Day Planner, never skip a Sunday. A lot of people at the gym always say never miss a Monday. We say never miss a Sunday. We believe that Win the Week, the Sunday page, is really setting yourself up and your program for success. This kind of came from me as a teacher and as a coach, knowing the importance of me on a Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, just spending an hour focusing on what my week looks like, kind of laying out the goals and what I have planned for that week that are really, really important. So I go into Monday super organized. A couple things you'll notice. You have your weekly quote. I believe reflecting on this quote, kind of journaling a little bit about what it means to you is really, really important. I think the power of the pen to paper is super important. And again, this is between you and you. What does that quote from John Wooden mean to you? Okay. Word of the week. The word of the week is a word that either you will pick individually, it's something that you want to focus on, or something that maybe your entire program has been focusing on. We've had programs that choose this for the whole week. We have programs that choose one word for the entire season. And that's their focus word for the entire season. It goes in that spot. And then again, a reflection on that word. What does the word resilient mean to you? What does the word grit mean to you? And why is it important? At Win the Day Planner also, we're super, super big on what are you reading or listening to? I prefer reading. I think there's something personally, it helps be really present when you're reading. But I also know it's 2023 and some people would prefer to listen to a podcast. And so we get that. But in a day and age where we have an opportunity to fill our brains with so much negative stuff, what are we putting in our brains that's going to be positive, that's going to help us, it's going to help create better habits and better routines? And that's not a pitch for Atomic Habits. I was just saying, I think it's really, really important. At the bottom of page 1, this is your weekly planner. What do you have coming up this week? And if you're in season and you're an athlete, maybe if you're a high school student, you have an early dismissal on Tuesday and Thursday for a game. That should automatically trigger you. I got to talk to these teachers ahead of time. Maybe I have a test on Wednesday. Maybe I have a big competition on Friday. Just put it all out there on Sunday so you can see what your week looks like. Flipping to page 2 of Win the Week, some reflections. I think we talked about this last week. One of the things that high school and even college athletes really struggle with is having honest reflection. Even old people like me sometimes struggle with having honest reflection. What did I do well last week? What did I not do well last week? And what were some things that I wish I would have done a little bit better? from those weekly reflections, now you're going to set your weekly goals. Maybe last week I didn't stay after practice 3 days a week like I said I was going to. That should be a goal this week. So based on your weekly reflection, now you're setting 2 or 3 goals for yourself for that upcoming week. The power of writing down personal season goals is huge. I think sometimes we overinflate the importance of writing down goals and less make the plan and the benchmarks to get to those goals a little less important. But I still think there's a lot of power in writing down your personal season goals as well as your team's goals for the season. High school, really, really important. When I was in high school, you didn't ever know what your grades were. Now it's at you can find your grade at a touch of a button. There's no reason to not be cognizant what your grades are currently in each class. And we have 8 periods there for you. I know most schools don't have more than 8 periods. Maybe if you're on an A-B schedule, you have 4 and 4. But if you're like my school, you're a 7-day period. You should be aware of your grades at all times. There should never be a point where report cards are coming out and you're panicking because you don't know what your math grade is. The note section could be a spot that says, all right, I missed a math quiz. I need to make up a math quiz, see the math teacher. So the real premise here is setting yourself up for success for the week. If you are a team doing this, it's not realistic all the time to think that you can meet with your team on Sunday. If you're a high school program, we do have a couple of programs that are Zooming every Sunday to do this together. But that's why we recommend probably doing a team meeting 15 minutes before practice every Monday to go over what the plan for the week looks like. This should already be filled out, but now we're just checking in and then laying out our daily plan for Monday and the rest of the week. So that's kind of our recommendation, but I did have a couple questions about why we feel this is so important. And I think as an adult, it takes a little bit of the stress away of what the whole week holds, and it makes it a lot smaller. It makes it a lot more manageable, and it kind of takes some of the anxiety away of what am I forgetting or what do I have? I'm super, super busy. We're all busy. Everybody's busy. Let's find a method to take that and make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to just turn it over to Jim really quickly. Jim, if you don't mind just mentioning a couple technical things, and then we will get it going with Coach Paige Reeve.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Everybody, again, as he mentioned, please use the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You can put your questions in there. When we get done with the topic, we're going to tackle all those questions. And if there are any technical issues, please just let us know, and I'll be glad to help you out and fix you up with anything that's going on there. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Jim. We are super excited to have Coach Paige Reeve. Coach is a former Division I athlete at Wake Forest. She was a volleyball player where she was also 2-time captain of that volleyball team. And she is also an ICF qualified professional coach. We are super stoked to have her on today. And with no further ado, Coach Paige Reeve, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Coach Rigby. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with y'all today. Excited for the opportunity to present a mental skill that I use all the time with the athletes that I work with, and something that I also personally use not only in an athletic scenario, but also just in life when it's an intense conversation. This is stuff that translates on and off the court. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. Okay, there we go. So the tool that I'm going to talk about today is called the Recognize, Release, and Refocus routine. And what this is it is we'll call it 3.5-step routine, and you'll see why I say 3.5 at the end. But I have it here as a 4-step process to overcome mistakes and regain confidence in high pressure situations. So this is a tool that you can use actually in the game. So there's awesome tools for reflection after practices, after games, and ways to prepare yourself before. This is something that I want to equip y'all with that you can use really in the heat of the moment when the game's on the line and it's high pressure. Go to the next. So I was just going to introduce myself real quick, but Coach Rigby actually already did me a solid with that. Got to play 4 years at Wake, which was the ride of a lifetime. I'm now a member of the International Coaching Federation, which is the governing body of professional coaches. And I run my own mental performance practice called Level 7 High Performance. And that's a old picture of me playing right there. So summary and what we're going to cover, kind of the long form version, is the recognize, release, refocus routine helps athletes develop the mental awareness and presence of mind to recognize when they're losing control or already out of control. And it then gives them the discipline and knowledge to get themselves back to a place of calm, confident focus, which most people on here know that's really when you're going to be performing at your best. And that when you're calm and confident and focused, that's when you get to truly achieve that peak performance potential. So step number 1 is recognize. And this one's often overlooked because it seems like kind of a precursor, but creating awareness around where you are currently in your performance, whether it's, with volleyball, it was always in between points, having to create that awareness. And football, it might be in between plays, baseball, in between pitches. But the saying goes, if you can't name it, you can't change it. So if you are unable to realize where you currently are with your performance, then it's going to be really hard to actually go and change it and go and actually do something about it. And so the tool that I like to use, and this was actually popularized and developed by Coach Brian Kane, if any of you guys are familiar with his work, is this concept of green light, yellow light, and red light performance. Green light is really that sense of flow. It's where everything's just clicking, you're at your best, you're performing in a way that you are confident in, and you're just kind of coasting through the game. Yellow light is a little bit of an in-between. It's kind of this critical moment of, okay, things can either go really well, and I'm going to perform well, or, okay, I might start to get to a place where I'm going to need to take a step back. And so yellow light is kind of this middle ground of, I'm not doing poorly. I don't need to be pulled from the game, but I know that I'm not at my best. And believe it or not, majority of our performance actually happens at yellow light situations. We want to think that we're going to be at green all the time, but that's just not realistic. And so having the awareness of where you are helps you get to where you want to be in that green light. And then red light is, okay, we got to take a step back. Maybe we have already lost control and we need to do something now just to move ourselves back into this yellow light situation. And the way that you can assess that is looking at your body language, your focus, and your self-talk, or your BFS for an acronym that's easier to remember. So body language in a green light scenario is shoulders are back, chin is up, you're making eye contact with your teammates, your coaches, all of those things. In a yellow light or red light scenario, it might look, you're slumped over a little bit more, your eyes aren't focused, you're looking at the ground, you're looking anywhere but your teammates and coaches. And that's just an important way for you to really have an internal gauge. And then your focus in a green light situation looks on, what am I doing and what am I going to do next? What does my team need from me? It's very deliberate, it's very intentional, and it's clear. But in a yellow light or red light scenario, you might be focusing on the play that just happened, or even the play that's about to happen. But often you don't have a present moment focus. And then your self-talk. In a green light, it's confident, it's encouraging, it's things like, you got this, next ball, those types of things. In yellow or red, it might be a little bit more self-critical, even condescending. I know you guys know the way that you talk to yourself in your head. It's not always kind. And so once again, being able to analyze these 3 aspects of yourself and know, okay, this is where I'm at in my performance. And now that I'm aware of it and I've recognized it, I can actually do something to change it. And I have a solid place to go from here. So after recognize is release. And there's 3 parts to this. You see 3 images in front of you. And I think baseball is a phenomenal example, especially these types of players, of how mental performance can really change the way that you approach the game and also how you play it. But step number 1 is to do something physical. And this is something to just initiate the process. So baseball, if you've ever watched, batters in between pitches, they're adjusting their gloves, they're hitting a certain part of the plate with the bat, they're, hitting their spikes with the bat, whatever it might be. But it's something physical, quick and simple to just initiate this process of releasing and bringing yourself back to a present moment focus so that you can eliminate the negative response of the stressors. So mine, for example, in volleyball was I would readjust my knee pads. My knee pads were always fine, but I would slide them down and I'd pull them back up to the exact same spot on my knee. It was just my way of initiating this process. The next step is to take a slow, deep breath while focusing on a focal point. So once again, using baseball as a good example, a lot of batters will pick a spot on their bat and take a deep breath while focusing on that. Mine was always looking at my feet. And that to me just signals to me, hey, be where your feet are. Come back to the present moment. Yes, you just made a mistake. That's okay. Come back, be where your feet are. And the important part is don't just look at the focal point. Actually take the time to take that deep breath. I promise you have time. And I also promise that it's going to change the way that you feel physically and mentally. And then the third thing is a verbal trigger. And this is the thing that releases you to move forward. So mine was always relaxed. That was my verbal trigger. That's what set me up for success because I wasn't one of those players that needed to be agitated and amped up. I was one of those players who performed much better when I was relaxed and taking things easy and had a little bit more of a stoic approach to things. So next we have refocus. And what this takes us from doing is takes us from, okay, we've released our negative response. Now, where do we actually want to go from here? And two parts to this. First, you have a reset breath. And the point of this reset breath is to bring your mind and your body back to a state of focus and relaxation so that you can then move forward, move past the play that just happened, move past the mistake, back into the moment. And then this last part is really, really important. If you've ever worked with a coach and they've talked about visualization or imagery and the importance of it, this is really where this comes into play. And so having a final TIF is the acronym, but a thought, an image, or a feeling, that is exactly what you want to happen next. And so thinking about how it's going to feel when you execute this next play, imagining exactly what you're doing, exactly where the ball is going, and then feeling that sense of accomplishment, that sense of pride that you're going to have. You know, everything happens twice, first in your mind and then in reality. And so what this is it's letting it happen in your mind so that you can set yourself up for success going forward. And then the reason I said 3.5 and not 4 is because the fourth step is to repeat. And it takes on average 66 days to develop a new habit. And so if you were to do this starting today for 66 days, by January 18th of next year, it will become an automatic process for you and you won't even have to think about it. And all in all, even though I just took a few minutes to explain it, this is going to happen in 5 seconds. This is something that is quick once it becomes ingrained in your mind and once it becomes a true habit. So give yourself 66 days to practice this. It doesn't have to be in a game, but if you're in a practice or if you are working on some things by yourself, you know, take the time to learn this process and to start to ingrain it into part of your routine. And eventually it's going to become habit. You're not even going to have to think about it. And then this quote from John Wooden that I love, the 8 laws of learning are explanation, demonstration, imitation, repetition, 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 repetition. So the more you do this, the better you're going to be at it and the more results it's going to produce for you. So it's going to be easier for you to overcome those mistakes. It's going to be easier for you to move on and to remain in the present moment when the stakes are highest, because at the end of the day, that's our goal. That's what we want to do. And that's what's going to help our teams win in the long run, whether you're a coach or a player. You know, this rings true for all of us. So with that, that is the 3.5 step routine to help athletes overcome those mistakes. And I would love to answer any questions that you guys might have, whether it be about this or about anything that pertains to mental performance or what you guys have on your mind.
Awesome. I'm going to start with 2 questions. I got one in the chat here, Coach, but I want to ask Actually, I'll start with the one I got in the chat first. Working with athletes right now, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, what are some of the biggest common struggles that you see amongst high school athletes, or maybe just trends that we're seeing in the nation, in the world right now amongst high school athletes? What are some things that you've seen from your end?
The two biggest things that I've seen, particularly in the high school space, that athletes are struggling with is comparison and connection. So in a day when we can see what everyone is doing just on our phone, and we can see exactly what their stats are, what they're posting, what offers they're getting from what schools, it's really easy to sit back and compare ourselves to everyone else around us instead of actually focusing on yourself, on what works for you, on what your goals are. You start to compare and contrast yourself to everyone because it's easy and it's readily available. But at the end of the day, what that does is it distracts you from your goals, and all it can do is damage your confidence. So that's one of the main things that I see, especially with how popular social media is and how many athletes are really active on it. And then the second piece that ties into the social media and the digital age part is connection. I was talking to a strength coach at a university in Tennessee the other day, and he was talking about how hard it is to just connect one-on-one with younger athletes, especially the ones straight out of high school, because they're so used to being able to pick up their phone and send a text message. And they're so used to spending hours and hours alone that what he's seeing is that instead of having a team of 14 dudes, he has 14 individuals wearing the same jersey and trying to run plays together. And so not only connecting with your teammates and with your coaches, but also being able to connect with yourself and to have compassion for yourself when you're struggling, and to have the wherewithal to reach out and ask for help. But I've seen a lot of athletes struggle with that because you can just feel connected so quickly by scrolling real quick on TikTok or Instagram, but they're missing that sense of genuine connection.
Yeah, I think that's I think both of those are, as John Maxwell says, liquid gold. I think as a teacher in a public school and a former coach, I think the part with connection is so wildly important. And guys, feel free to drop Q&A in here because I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, and I don't want to, but drop a question in there. If you have a question, I have one more queued up. But I think someone said that we are the most connected society right now, but they're also the most phony connections. And I think you made a comment earlier. Olivia made the same comment last week. We don't do a great job of being where our feet are and being present with ourselves, because this takes the place of presence, right? Like I tell my students on a frequent basis, like whenever there's a down, we do mindfulness walks, and we'll go outside and we'll do nature walks. And whenever there's a moment of like downtime, it's a scroll, because that's that dopamine release, and that's that comfort, and that's that I don't know how to just be. And that is a really, really scary thing, I think, amongst high school, college, old people like me. I find myself doing it frequently, and I have to remind myself not to do that because that's such a big thing. How do we, and this is not the question I had queued up, but how do we change that connection piece? And Olivia, feel free to jump in here too. How do we change that connection piece interpersonally? How do we learn, or how do we teach that, reteach that to high school and college age kids? Or I mean, do you guys have ideas about that?
I think the first thing is, as coaches, you have to be the example. And so the best way to get some vulnerability from players is to loan it out and to be vulnerable first in the conversation. And that's truly how it happens, is one conversation at a time. It's not something that we're going to be able to change just over a week or in a night or even over a season. It's something that you have to do consistently, and you have to let the effect of that compound over time. But I'm big on being vulnerable first in conversations, because it creates this safe place and this safe container for the athlete to then realize, okay, that's how we're approaching this. That's what the standard is going to be in this conversation. So even as coaches, it can be scary, but it's something that I think is our job and our obligation if we're going to serve athletes as powerfully as we can.
I love that. And Olivia, feel free to jump on. Olivia says vulnerability is not a one-time thing. And if you want to jump in, jump in. I'm going to say this too. I think that is such a true statement. And I don't mean to like throw shade at coaches, but I think it's a really easy, and I'm certainly not talking about the coach that you spoke with. I think we as coaches have given ourselves a really big crutch over the last 2 or 3 years to say things when things aren't going. Like when our team's not gelling together, we say things like, "Oh, it's just these kids these days. It's just this." And I always challenge. I mean, I've been there, but like your student, Frank Martin, the coach at the basketball coach at the University of South Carolina. I don't know if he's still there or not, but he just says kids haven't changed one bit. They will only do what we allow them to do, right? And so when we model good behaviors and we have high expectations, and you say, you know, at Wake Forest or at Kentucky, this is what our standard is, and this is what we're going to do, or at, you know, Delaware High School, this is what we do. Students will almost always meet you if it's consistent expectations and a good example, and you lead by example, and you demonstrate what it looks like, because the reality is some of them don't have that example at home to see that, because that's what they do when they're down. So Olivia, go ahead and jump in. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say Paige is spot on with that reflection, and like vulnerability is so hard to do, but it requires like people to do it and just take that first step. So totally agree with what you said. And I also really loved like the parallel from your presentation to last week. I thought there was like such good connections with it. So just thank you so much for sharing.
All right, second question. This is my own personal question, because I somebody gave this to Olivia last week. If you could look back at high school or college Paige, what 2 or 3 pieces of advice would you give yourself? I think a lot of times, again, we're so big picture that, you know, when you're old like me, you look back and I wish I would have done this. What pieces of advice would you give to yourself?
2 really stand out to me. The first one is sports are what you do, not who you are. So you're not defined by your performance. You're defined who you are inside. Not by your stats, not by who you are when you have the jersey on, but actually by who you are when you have the jersey off. What type of human are you? That's actually how you're defined. And that's what your identity is in, and no one can take that away from you. And then the second one is to compete with gratitude. I first heard that from Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback, and that just rang so true to me. I heard it in the middle of my freshman season, and I was struggling big time because I was so focused on getting the playing time that I wanted and playing in the position that I wanted to play in, that I forgot to just be grateful for where I was. And I forgot how fortunate I was and how many hours of work I had put in, how many sacrifices not only I had made, but my family had made to get me to where I was in that moment. And so to be grateful every single day, and then to go on and compete with that gratitude, you're going to play better, you're going to enjoy it more. And looking back, you're going to know that you didn't waste a single moment. So sports are what you do, not who you are, and compete with gratitude.
I love that. I spoke with a high school coach, a colleague of mine. They were going to play in the state semifinals this afternoon or this evening. They unfortunately lost, but I said, what are you going to tell? What are you going to tell your team? You know, you haven't been here before. What are you going to tell them? I'm going to say, I want them to show gratitude to themselves. Number one, be grateful that you are here, that you've sacrificed this amount of time and energy and social time with your friends to put in this immense amount of work that you put in. You should be grateful that you are here and that you get this opportunity. But number two, gratitude to your support system, exactly what you just said, to your teammates, to your family, to your friends, because you don't get to these places alone. There are lots of people there supporting you. So I just thought that was a really nice kind of parallel. We have a question in the chat here that says, how as athletes do we become more vulnerable to our coaches? Ooh, that flip that around a little bit there. I like that. Paige, I'll give you that one first. How do as athletes do we become more vulnerable to our coaches?
That's a good question. And I think there's two pieces to that. One is don't make your coaches chase you. So especially in high school, your coaches are teachers, their parents, their coaches, and bottom line, they care about you. And if they don't, they should be fired. And that's a conversation for another time. But your coaches care, and they're also not perfect. I know at least I did. I held my coaches kind of up on this pedestal, like they were these infallible human beings. And when they let me down, I took it personally. But they're not perfect. So it's okay to also be the one who reaches out and initiates the conversation with your coach. You don't have to wait for them to contact you. Ask them about their day. Ask them how they're doing. And vulnerability, man, it requires a leap of faith. I think Olivia nailed it with that. It's scary because it's this feeling of like, what if it isn't returned? Is this going to be embarrassing? How is this going to feel? But you have to go out on faith, and you have to loan it first before you receive it. And I promise you, I'd say 99% of the time, two things are going to happen. One, it's going to be returned by your coach. And two, they're going to have a whole new level of respect for you as a human and as an athlete, because they know they were once in your shoes. They know how hard that is to do. They know that it's scary, but take that leap of faith because it will be returned to you.
I love that. Another question, and this is pertaining to teammates. Paraphrasing a little bit here, what are some methods or what are some strategies that you've seen athletes do to become better teammates, to become a better support system for one another in their programs? I know I referenced John Gordon always talks about being a come with me teammate, where you're always pulling somebody up. And what are some things that you have seen with your athletes that represent methods to be a better teammate?
I think there's two things that come up with that. First is, what is your mindset around your team? Is it you and then everyone else, or do you truly see yourself as a part of a bigger unit? Because I'll be vulnerable with y'all. When I first got to college, it was me and then everyone else. And it was, I wanted to be the star. I wanted to get the most playing time. And that was miserable. I mean, it was awful. And not only that, but it impacted how I played. It impacted my level of overall happiness. And when I decided to finally buy into the idea that this isn't about me, this actually has nothing to do with me, and everything that I do is to serve the greater purpose of the team, man, it was so much more rewarding. I played better. I actually ended up getting more playing time when I stopped thinking about myself all the time. But I was that selfish teammate my freshman year of college, and it's not going to get you anywhere. There's that quote, it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. You can have some short-term wins being the selfish teammate. It can feel good for a little bit, but long-term, it's going to come back to bite you, and it's not going to work. So the first thing is you have to shift your mindset around your team, around what part you play, and realizing that you're a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle itself. And then the second thing that I think is really easy, but often overlooked at all levels, is actually spending time together outside of the gym, off the field, outside of the weight room, and getting to know your teammates as humans, so that when you are in the heat of the moment, right? Say you're having a disagreement with a teammate, or they just made a critical mistake in a critical time. You're not just looking at them as the performer. You're not just looking at them as the athlete. You know them as a person, and you know what makes them tick. You know what they need to feel supported and encouraged. And then because you have that sense of connection with them, you're able to show up as a better teammate, because it's no longer just two athletes interacting. It's two human beings interacting with a sense of connection.
I love it. All right, I got a couple questions starting to pile up here. How do athletes find the connection and the confidence, not only within themselves, but as a team as well?
So I once read that connection comes from speaking with someone and being with someone without feeling like you have anything to prove. And I just read that a couple weeks ago, and I think about it a lot. But to be genuinely curious about these people, to be genuinely curious about your teammates, to learn about them. And if you're not, maybe you're not in the right place. If you don't feel like you want to get to know your teammates, that's an opportunity for you to take a step back and look at, okay, am I in the right spot? Am I at the right program, or is this a me problem? And y'all, the truth is, a lot of times when we are afraid to connect with other people, it's because we don't think we are worth connecting to. It's because we lack connection with ourselves and we lack self-confidence. And so we want to stay hidden because we think we're not good enough for the other person. So I'd say if you're struggling to connect, you should probably look at yourself first. And I mean that with love and encouragement, not as like a finger pointing thing of you're doing something wrong, but this is an opportunity for you to change how you view connection. And confidence is something that has to come from within, but it also comes from repetition and it comes from experience. So if it's confidence, in the sense of how are we physically playing? Are you doing visualization techniques? Are you spending time envisioning what is it that we want to do? What is our goal? And what are the steps that we need to take to get there? That's one of the quickest ways that I've ever seen athletes boost confidence is mental reps. And it takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. And if you're willing to do that and you're willing to allow that effect to compound over time, that's going to build your confidence. But when you can find that confidence, it's often because you have connection. So it's kind of what comes first, the chicken or the egg type of thing. But it truly does start with you.
I love it. All right. I'm going to go to, with a few of my athletes, I have incorporated a release and refocus routine. We took time for them to create it, but I'm struggling with how I can help and make sure they are incorporating it during practices and games. Any ideas?
I think reminders are always encouraged, but you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. So I respect that as a coach, you've already been incorporating these things and you've already been teaching them to your athletes and equipping them with the best tools possible. But at the end of the day, the motivation has to come from within them. You can only get them so far. So it's okay to hold them accountable, as in like, hey, did you do it after the game? And if they say no, dig around a little bit, ask some open-ended questions. So there's a difference between getting judgmental and getting curious, like I mentioned before. Okay, well, why not? What got in the way of you doing this routine? Because maybe it's they forgot. And if they forgot, okay, then we need to find a way to remind them because their brains aren't fully developed. But maybe it's, man, I'm just so stressed out. I'm so fearful about this moment that I can't bring myself to actually do it. Okay, well, now we have something to go off of. Now we know they're not just ignoring you. They're not just avoiding it. There's actually a more deep-rooted inner block that needs to be explored, whether it's with you or whether it's with, someone who's a professional. It's very rare that kids are just being defiant to be defiant. A lot of times there's something behind that, and it really only takes a few good, open-ended, powerful questions that can't be answered with yes or no to figure that out. At the end of the day, if they're the anomaly and they're just being defiant, maybe that's not where you spend your time.
That's a great answer to a really good question. I really like that. Olivia, I might bring you in on this one a little bit too, because you talked about this last week. How do teams find that balance if some people have a calm approach and some need to stay hype? Olivia hit on this last week. Paige, I'll let you go first. But how do teams find that balance if some people have a calm approach and some need to stay hype?
I think it's really important to have both. I think a team with all hype men or all stoics, either one of those sounds pretty boring to me. So I think first of all, approaching it is great. We have balance. But yeah, that can be hard to manage. And what it comes down to is each player needs to know which one they are. So that goes to that recognize piece, that cultivating of awareness. Once you know who you are and what motivates you, what powers you, then you're able to react accordingly. And as a coach, you can then say, okay, let's say this person's losing control a little bit. Well, I know that they're a hype man, so I'm going to go fire them up. And this person needs to be a little bit more calmed. Maybe yelling at them isn't the right way to go about things. And so I think really having that awareness is almost all of the battle, because you're never going to have all one or all the other. That's just unrealistic. But to strike that balance, you just need to know what each type of person or what each archetype needs in order to perform at their best.
Love it. Olivia, that's basically what we talked about last week. Go ahead.
I mean, Paige hit the nail on the head. I think that's like a perfect example. Like the team would be boring if it was all hype or if it was all stoic. So I think a lot of times it comes down to also, as an athlete, recognizing your individual zone and then also being flexible. Like, I know in this world of like perfectionism, everyone's trying to reach this expectation that feels unattainable. So just being flexible in that different situations are going to come up and you got to be able to adapt in those situations.
Yeah, I think for me as a coach too, it took me some time to recognize that, number one, not everybody was like me. You know, I had to know my athletes better. And secondly, I had to let my athletes know each other and understand what each individual person needed. And, you know, in the wrestling world, you have this wild sense of machoismo, like intensity by a lot of people. And when someone's not like you tend to judge them and classify them differently. But that's because you haven't recognized what that person needs. So I think being open about that in a team setting, like, hey, listen, Bobby, Stevie, Johnny, you guys are bouncing around before the matches, but Billy over there needs a little bit of time to like bring himself down, or else he's not going to compete at the highest level, which we need him to do at the team. So respect that and recognize that. And I think knowing each other is really, really important as well. So I think great answers by both of you guys. Looks like the chat group is bad. There was one question I didn't get to answer, and it was, oh, here we go. When developing a consistency in good habits, how can we overcome negative obstacles that constantly keep getting thrown at us? Coach, that's a little bit of a broad one there. I think I know what you're going for, but and I'll just touch it just for a minute, and I'll let Paige jump on it. I think the old adage that when you just need to know where you're going, right? When you know what your goal is and when you know what you stand for, obstacles get easy, if that makes sense. Like when you truly believe in the mission that you're taking, you know obstacles will be thrown at you, and you know what you stand for, so you can handle them, right? So like I wasn't always a good coach, but once I became a better coach, parents would ask me things and I knew where I stood. The answers were always easy because I knew what I believed and I felt firm in what I believed. So the answers were easy. I kind of feel like it's the same way when you know what your mission is in this program or this product. The obstacles are going to come, but it shouldn't deter you from what you believe and what your goal is. That's my approach on that. And Paige, I'll let you take a little swing at it too if you want.
Yeah, I think knowing your why as an individual coach, as each individual players, and then the team as a whole, which, like you said, you know, your mission, your purpose, that has to be something greater than your own individual selfish desires. So what are we doing this for? Why are we doing this? And that allows you to view obstacles and view those types of things as a bend in the road, not the end of the road. And that's a huge difference when it comes to overcoming those, is knowing there is another side. And, you know, my absolute favorite quote, I had it everywhere in college, was, it ain't about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. I read that every single day, multiple times a day. And it's so true in sports and life, all of it, it doesn't matter. Get knocked down 7 times, stand up 8, whatever you want to call it. Taking time to actually, okay, your why, you established it at the beginning of the season. And if you didn't, you should going forward, but take time to reconnect with it too. So if there are kids who are playing for fun, how can you incorporate more play into practice? If there are kids who are doing this for a scholarship because they need it in order to get the education that they want, how can you help support them in those goals and take a minute to ask them about how the recruiting process is going, where they're at, how they're feeling? So not only knowing your why, but being intentional about reconnecting with it and reaffirming it for yourself and for your team when times do start to get tough, because they will. For every single team, for every single season, times will get tough. So being prepared for that, knowing how to overcome it is key.
Love it. What I want to do something really quickly, because it's kind of hard for me to, on the web, in the webinar format, it's hard for me to identify exactly who's who. If you are a coach of a program, do you mind dropping it in the Q&A, your first name and last name, where you coach and what sport, just so I can get an, I see lots of coaches on here, but I'm just curious about who's who and what sport, if you don't mind. That way it'll give me a better idea of who's on the call, because some people are first name, some people are last name. I recognize a few of you guys, but if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the Q&A, that would be super helpful to us. We've got about 10 minutes, guys. Drop them in the chat. Drop your questions in the chat. We've rattled off about 6 or 7 questions so far, but drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. That would be super, super helpful to us. Any last minute questions that you might have for Paige, for Olivia, for myself, just general questions, go ahead and drop those for us. I will, I know one of the coaches on here last weekend, there's several wrestling coaches in here. I will ask the question for these folks. Coach Paige, in some sports, it is easier to have that downtime, to that refocus strategy in place. In high intensity sport like wrestling, where it's easy for one mistake to turn into 2, because the amount of time that you have like in between a play is not the same as in baseball, where you step out of the batter's box, or in volleyball after a match point, or swim is like when you're out of the pool, I guess, hopefully. But what could wrestlers do, or what could someone who's, a little more high intensity with less breaks to kind of flip that brain? Are there any strategies that they could use to kind of, in the heat of the moment, battle that?
Yeah, I think, those sports is where your mindset and your preparation is really where the hard work lies. So with sports with downtime, it's the in-between moments, it's the small moments and the micro things that you're doing. But when it comes to those fast-paced sports where you don't have that opportunity, it's really what you're doing before and after that is going to impact the mindset that you have when things are moving really quickly and you don't have the time to really even take a deep breath sometimes. And so that's where I think visualization techniques are absolutely key, because when you can get to that heat of the moment and you realize that you've been here 100 times already, all of a sudden the moment's not too big. It's just another moment. And you're able to perform without all that added pressure. And then the other thing that I think is often overlooked, and Coach Rigby, I love watching you go through the planner because you covered it, is the reflection piece. And another tool is call it the well, better, how. What did you do well? What can you do better? How are you going to do that? That same thing, y'all, this is something that takes 5 to 10 minutes after a game, before you go to bed. I'll kind of run it through my head every single day, to be honest with you. What did I do well today? What could I have done better? And how can I do that? And same thing with that compounding effect. The more you do it and the more you train your mind, it becomes second nature. And all of a sudden, you're not having to sit down and carve out pieces of your day. You're just constantly reflecting and adapting and reflecting and adapting and going through this loop of constant improvement. So I think in those sports, it's really what you do before and after that's going to make the difference.
Okay, well, I'm going to steal that. Well, better how. That's really good. I like that. I think, and you just kind of put me onto something here. In wrestling in particular, I know we have at least 3 wrestling coaches on here. I agree. It's if you just try to prepare, if you just try to put a strategy in place in a match, it's way too late. Like, this needs to be very intentional in the practice room, and it needs to be intentional by the coach and the plan. And so one of the things that I was really systematic about was putting my athletes in high stress situations and creating comfortable adversity. When I say comfortable, I mean like it's adversity, and you know it's going to happen to you, and you're still going to get angry about it, but you're going to have to figure out how you react, because it'll be uncomfortable when we get into the match and you don't know how to react. So for instance, I would put like a high intensity wrestling practice in place. They had to get X amount of, takedowns, and I would purposely not give takedown points. And they knew it was going to happen, so they could prepare for it, and they could prepare how they refocus. Not everybody could do it. And so we'd come back the next practice or 2 or 3 practices later, and we'd refocus it, and it would get better and better and better. But I think you're 100% right on there. If you just expect to go into the match and you have a trigger word, or you have some sort of physical, whatever, it's too late if you haven't practiced it beforehand, because you need that muscle memory that to just take over. You need to be able to just say, I've been here before, whether it be through adverse situations in a practice room or through strategic visualization strategies, and I can get through this. And also too, at the end of the day, if it doesn't, what's the worst? Like, this is who I am, not this is what I do. It's not who I am. It kind of goes back to that same concept too. So releasing some of that pressure. All right, love it. Guys, I got time for one more question. I did see that we have an entire softball team on here, which is awesome. I'm really stoked about that. I would love for one more question in the last couple of minutes, if anybody has one, for any of us, preferably these 2 professionals, not the guy who's losing his voice a little bit here. All right. Well, here's what we'll do, guys. I will stay on the call for another 6, 7, 8 minutes. Feel free to stay on if you have questions. If not, we hope to see you guys back here next Monday. We'll use the same exact link. We'll go at 8 p.m. again. I'm just collecting data about where the teams are coming from on these calls. I don't have too many West Coast teams as much as we have like Central Time. So there's a chance in the future we might move this call to 7 o'clock, pending our West Coast people. But for next week, we will stay on at 8 o'clock. Coaches, I did see that a few of you invited some others in. I want you to invite coaches in. This is a free call for you guys. We have plenty of licenses. So we're stoked. Bring your teams in. I love that we have a whole team watching and asking tonight. Let's get this thing as big as possible, and get a community built here to be able to help student athletes reach their full potential. So thank you guys so much for coming. Like I said, I'll stay on for another 5 minutes if you have a question. If you want to talk to Coach Paige Reeve, please do so. Check both of these ladies out on Instagram and reach out to them if you have any questions or need their services. All right, guys, thanks so much. Paige, we'll see if we get any more last minute questions in here.
Yeah, I'll hang around.
Oh, we just got one. What are some strategies that can help athletes improve their mindset and preparation for their game?
3 things that come up for me right away. Number 1 is setting intentions. So I'm being very specific and not saying goals here for a reason. And it's because goals are often associated with outcomes. And what we want to do is focus on the process, not the outcome. And so setting intentions for yourself of, I am going to do X thing. I am going to encourage this many teammates. But these things aren't associated with any sort of outcome, because at the end of the day, we don't control the outcome. All we control is, what we do. We control the 6 inches between our ears, but we don't control what the other team does, what the refs do, what the weather's like. So I usually ask my athletes to set 1 to 3 clear intentions that can be written out in one single sentence. So don't make it wordy, don't make it extravagant, but set 1 to 3 intentions. The second thing, and I've mentioned it and I'm going to harp on it until everyone starts doing it, is if you are not doing visualization exercises with your team, you are failing to serve them to the best of your ability. It is so simple. It is one of the most simple and effective tools that is so overlooked because it can feel awkward at times, especially with high schoolers, and you ask them to close their eyes and picture something. Get over it, because it is one of the most effective tools that you can use. And asking them to take a few deep breaths, 3 to 5 deep breaths, and think about executing the play perfectly. What does it smell like? What does the grass feel like under your feet? What are you hearing? And to truly put yourself in that scenario, because everything happens twice, first in your mind and then in reality. And those reps are absolutely invaluable. TCU baseball, before their starting pitchers go out and throw, the day before, they have to get fully dressed in their uniforms and walk out to the mound and throw a shadow bullpen where they don't even have a ball. They just have to walk themselves through all of their pitches, how they walk onto the mound, how they walk or run off, what they're doing, and go through that routine. So that should show you right there how important this is. That's one of the best baseball programs in the nation on a consistent basis. And they're doing this with every single player that they can. And then the third thing that I think is often overlooked, and some people might think it's a little bit woo-woo, but meditation. What meditating is about at the end of the day is not transporting yourself or going into a transpersonal state or being, wearing orange robes up in the mountains in Tibet. What meditation is about is creating space between the stimulus, the external stimulus, and your response, where you can choose a reaction that is most beneficial to you. So meditation isn't some complicated thing that you have to spend hours doing, 5 to 10 minutes before a game where you're just focused on your breath and bringing your awareness back to the present moment is a phenomenal way to set yourself up for success. So 3 things: intentions, visualization, and meditation are 3 great ways.
Man, I just really rock star answer. I think my students and my athletes used to think I was kind of like a little bit of a weird hippie for all these things. And but I think when they see the value in it, I think that's one of the most important things too, is especially for young athletes, they have to see some value in it. And it's your job as the coach to convince them of the value in it. Coach, I used to lead visualization for my athletes. Mm-hmm. And that's the weird part. So any coaches, but like we're in 2023. And so for me, what I did my last couple of years is I went to Spotify and I found a fantastic guy on Spotify who's cool with beautiful music in the background, who brought everything to the table that I was looking for. What does it smell like? What does it look like? Remember why you do this. Remember your first positive memory of the sport. Remember all this stuff. And I was just like, it's hard to see, but yeah, you can't see it, but it's this guy right here. So if anybody's looking, let me know. And I just play this. It's 18-minute track. We would, and then before I knew it, my athletes would beg for it on a weekly basis. We would do it twice a week sometimes. And I think the coach I spoke to earlier said, I'm thinking about doing some visualization before my game. And I said, man, it's too late. I don't mean to be mean. It's too late. Like we should have done this 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. I just think you're going to mess up the routine. And then the other thing you said about meditation, I work in a public school, and a lot of my students are like, they get really, their parents are like, oh, we don't know. We don't do that. And I say, okay, so I don't even call it meditation anymore. I call it SSP because I'm just a gym teacher and I make things really simple. I call it still, silent, and present. We get still. we get silent and we find a way to get present, whether it's looking at clouds, whether it's looking at trees, whether it's grounding ourselves, and all of a sudden the negative connotation goes away. But when my students learn to do that, and these are just normal run-of-the-mill students, but athletes as well, they start coming up to me secretly and they start saying, hey, what's up with that SSP today? What's up with that SSP? Because there's a little bit of a negative connotation with it, but when athletes learn to do it and adults learn to do it, the benefits are just immense and really, really make a huge difference. So I love that question. We got one more here. We're 9 o'clock, but that's okay. You said earlier that athletes typically perform at the yellow light and not the green light. How do we capitalize on that yellow light mentality?
You capitalize on the yellow light mentality by being aware that that's where you are, but not complacent. And so there's a really key balance that needs to be struck there. So recognizing, okay, we're not at our very best. We're not in flow state right now. We're not setting records here, but we're not going to stop pursuing that either. And so I think it's a line that needs to be walked, but it's very possible. And so knowing what your yellow light is and also what your green light is, because you've been there before. Every coach can think of that one game where they're like, man, everything was just clicking. It was like, who is this team? Who are these players? We were at our absolute best. You know what green light looks like. So you know where you are and you know where you want to go. You just can't stop moving in that direction. So don't stand still.
Love it. All right, guys, it's 9 o'clock. We appreciate everybody coming on. Thank you so much. Coach Paige, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We'll have Coach back in a couple weeks. Yeah. And if again, I'll have the session recorded. If you need to see it again, let me know. I'll send it out to you guys. But we appreciate everybody coming in, and we will see you next Monday. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.